back to The Inquiry. I'm Gregory Harms, and today we'll be talking about the political spectrum. All those words and that thing that gets discussed a lot on, news outlets and in the political discourse, left, right, and center. And what does that mean? So that's what we're going to be talking about. But first, I got a song. Songs get stuck in my head. It doesn't take much. I can dream the song and then it's stuck in my head, or I hear the song and it's stuck in my head. So last night I was watching this show. Doesn't matter what show. It's not a great show. They played "Baby What a Big Surprise" by Chicago.
Baby, what a big surprise! Right before my very eyes.
That's stuck in my head. It's not a terrible song. It could be worse. It's been worse. Last week was worse. Last week I had, it must have been for a couple days, Magnet and Steel by Walter Egan.
Magnet and I am steel.
That was stuck in my head for a while. And I don't know. I don't think it's a great song by any means. But then I had to look him up, Walter Egan, because I didn't know that's who sang Magnet and Steel. I had to look him up, and so I did look him up. And I discovered that he's still in the business. He's still out there singing and doing his thing to this day. But that's like his only real hit that came out in 1978. So I was thinking, he's got to play that song everywhere he plays, because the crowd's gonna, that's the song, that's his song, that's it. And I wonder what that must be like for him, playing at state fairs and stuff. And okay, we got to play it. I mean, he can't tell the band, all right, guys, we're gonna not play Magnet and Steel tonight. We're gonna roll out some of the new stuff. The crowd ain't having that. Got to play that. And the crowd, who seeks out that song? Who seeks out a live performance of that song? Like, all these things kind of flooded my thinking. Like, I started picturing the crowd, and like they're probably really into it. Like, honey, Walter Egan's playing a state fair. God, I hope he plays Magnet and Steel. Hey, honey, you think he's gonna play Magnet and Steel? Like, that's why they go. Like, we've seen Frankie Valli, we've seen Christopher Cross, so might as well bring it home and go see Walter Egan. Wow. And I know some of you are thinking, like, okay, how many times has Mick done Jumpin' Jack Flash? You can see how those are different, right? Those aren't the same. I mean, yeah, Mick has to go out there and sing Jumpin' Jack Flash, but there's 2 hours of really good music, and that's one of the songs that he has to play. And Jumpin' Jack Flash is probably one of the greatest rock and roll songs ever written. I'd put it in the top 3. But Magnet and Steel? I wouldn't put that in the top 10,000. you know. I'm going to get hostile emails. I probably offended a Walter Egan fan out there somewhere. Get a hostile email. How dare you? How dare you trash talk Walter Egan? My wife and I just saw Walter Egan, and he sang the hell out of Magnet and Steel. Your podcast is rubbish. I apologize to all the Walter Egan fans out there. I didn't mean to cause bad feelings. Do you know that Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks sang backup on that song? They did. Isn't that something? But Chicago, I want to hear that song again.
Baby, what a big surprise. Right before my very eyes.
I was probably... It's fun, you know, it's a guilty pleasure. I probably heard it on a school bus. That song came out in 1977. I was 5 years old. I was for sure on a school bus when I first heard that song. There's got to be something there. That's not a bad song. Come on. All right. The political spectrum. I think before we get to the political spectrum, I want to talk about power. Because power seems to be one of those things that many of my fellow Americans just don't seem to understand very well. And they see it in movies, they see it in series, Netflix. I mean, they see it everywhere, but they don't connect what they're seeing to their lived reality. And I think that's important to know that. So this image right here, you have two vertices that are perpendicular, and the vertical one is what I call vertical power, and the horizontal one's what I call horizontal power. So vertical power, you could think of vertical power as being, well, it's highly concentrated, and it's, I don't know, active or activated. That's government and the corporate sector. It's super concentrated, and you know, gleaming skyscrapers and lots of money and so on and so forth. In some countries, you put military in there as well. And I'm not suggesting the military doesn't have power in the United States, because it absolutely does, but it doesn't have executive power, and it doesn't have huge influence over legislation and so on. It does have influence, no doubt about it, but not the way the corporate sector does. If there's a junior partner in between those two, it would be the government, and the corporate sector is the senior partner, and it has tremendous power and influence. Like I said, it's concentrated. It's highly concentrated. So if we look at the numbers, just real quick look at the numbers. You got 435 representatives in the House. And then you add to that 2 senators per state, so 100 senators. Okay? And then you got, I'm going to use the Fortune 500. Now the Fortune 500 is a list published every year by Fortune magazine, and that's the 500 largest corporate firms in America. They've been doing this since the 50s. So the 500 largest corporations in America. So in each corporate firm, you have a board of directors. We'll just take 12. That's roughly. I mean, maybe more, maybe less, fewer. That is to say. Let's call it a dozen. So 500 times a dozen, and then maybe I'm going to take 6 as the number of top level, what are called C-suite executives. Those are that's your chief executive officer, your chief financial officer, your chief operating officer, all those top leadership positions in the corporation, right? Executive leaders, officers. Let's take 6 per corporation, and then 12 for board of directors, and then we add 535 members of Congress, and then we round way up, and then we round up considerably to 10,000, and then we have a nice round manageable figure. I think I got that manageable figure. I think I got that wording from True Grit.
Mr. Cogburn, in your 4 years as U.S. Marshal, how many men have you shot?
Never shot nobody I didn't have to.
Well, that was not the question. How many?
Shot or killed?
Let us restrict it to killed so that we may have a manageable figure.
The remake by the Coen brothers, not the John Wayne thing. Yeah, I think that's where I got that. I had to, because I didn't come up with that. I didn't manageable figure. That came from True Grit. So we got 10,000. Okay, that's 10,000 people running the country. At the top, there's a managerial class, and there's but I mean at the top, you got 10,000 people in the United States, basically running the United States. The seating capacity at the United Center, where the Chicago Bulls play, is 23,000. They could all comfortably, with a seat between each person, go see the Bulls. So that's not a lot of people. And then that vertical line is perforated because it's brittle, it's fragile. It needs constant care, constant maintenance, and at any given moment, that horizontal group, that's you, 300 plus million Americans, could spoil the party. So again, there's a relationship. So you got the population, and you've got vertical power, and the preponderance of power resides in the population, not in vertical power. There's 300 million of you, more, 330 million. That's where the real power resides, but it's kind of a sleeping giant, right? It's kind of a sleeping giant, and vertical power just kind of does whatever it wants, and it has to keep an eye on the population. There are red lines it can't cross. Like, you can't have children working in factories anymore. Can't have slavery. There's a lot of things you can't have anymore. Which they would probably prefer to go back to the bad way of doing things, the bad old days. They'd be just fine with that. But the population, there are red lines you can't cross. And so, I ask students, I've talked about this with students any number of times, and I ask the students, and it's always interesting. Take General Motors, okay. What is stopping the workers of General Motors from taking over General Motors tomorrow morning? Just taking it over and say, this company is ours now, and they fire the board of directors, they fire all the C-suite executives, they fire all senior management, and say, look, if you want to work here, you can just fill out an application and go down to HR, and other than that, go clean out your desk, and you're done. And what's stopping them? And so I wait. And there's usually a good bit of silence, and then the hands start going up. Like, they couldn't do this. And this couldn't happen, It's illegal. They call the police. You're gonna throw 125,000 people in jail. They wouldn't know what to do. The leadership in the given corporations like General Motors, they're viewed as the adults, and the workers are just dopey children who need guidance. And I asked the students, why couldn't the workers just hold elections and find leadership that way, establish leadership that way? And that's why couldn't they do that? But the students have a real hard time thinking that thought, because they've been taught that the workers are children and that the children need guidance from, the adults, the board of directors, the top executives, senior management, and so on and so on. And it's like they don't want to think that thought, that the workers could take over General Motors, and the people who make cars will still be making cars, and the people who do accounting will still be doing accounting, and payroll would get done, and everyone would continue to do their jobs. But there wouldn't be some person making, tens of millions of dollars every year because they're really smart. You see, that's what we think. If you're making $20 million a year, then you're probably really smart, and you're a person of vision, and you can see the horizon, and you make the hard decisions. No, I think the workers can perfectly run that company. They already do. And so sometimes the students will say, like, well, what if somebody gets greedy? You mean like right now? Like, they paint these sort of nightmare scenarios about what would happen if the workers took over, but the nightmare scenario fits what's going on now, and they don't, and there's a hesitation to see that the nightmare scenario they're sketching, that this nightmare vision of what would happen to General Motors is in place right now. What if someone gets greedy? Heaven forbid. So the sleeping giant will awaken from time to time, and vertical power, that is the government and corporations, they're very mindful of that they don't want to cross that line. They don't want to cross that. They don't want to. There's a threshold there, and they want to leave that alone. So. The government gets funny ideas about privatizing this and privatizing that, and they want to play with Social Security and so on and so on. And then people get really upset. The Bush W administration had the nifty idea of taking a wrench to Social Security, and several million retirees looked up from their oatmeal and said, like hell. And then they dropped it. They dropped it immediately. Because they knew they'd stepped over the line. So the sleeping giant is usually asleep, but it does wake up occasionally. And when it does, vertical power responds. They're very aware of that, and that goes for any government. Government's always leery of the population, and they're very vigilant, and they keep a close watch on the population because they're afraid of it. Power is always afraid of the population in any system, and I do mean in any system. That's how that works. They're afraid of They're afraid of the power that's held by the population. But the population is sort of, especially in this one, they're kind of unaware that they hold most of the cards. And yeah, Americans, it's the freest country in the world. I mean, I'm not saying that waving a flag. I don't mean them, sound patriotic, but I mean that is precisely accurate. The United States is the freest country in the world. Its citizenry has unparalleled access to information, the ability to articulate political viewpoints and whatnot. You can start a podcast, you can start a newspaper, you can start a website, you can do whatever you want. You can say whatever you want about the president or the members of Congress. You can't say anything illegal, but I mean, you could go stand out on the street corner and till you're blue in the face, you could criticize the government. Nobody cares. There's no secret police, sitting at the cafe listening, and then they throw you in jail for 6 months to let you get your head straight. If that doesn't happen in the United States. It doesn't happen. There are no knocks on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning. They don't bring out the German Shepherds. They don't bring out the the crowd control here can get a little ugly, but not for, has more to do with other issues in politics, not talking about the government, not talking about whatever. So that's a really rough primer on how power works, and the relationship between the population and vertical power, which leads us to the spectrum. So part of, I mentioned that the vertical power is vigilant, that it's keeping a close watch on the population. It does that. It sounds sinister, but they don't have to watch very closely. They can just monitor the public opinion polls, and the public opinion polls will tell us, everybody tells us, what's going on, what Americans want, what Americans don't want, what they're afraid of, what their hopes and dreams are, where they want to go on vacation, everything, what kind of washing machines they like, and stuff like this, everything. There's a very long list of entities that do public opinion polls. Universities do it, news outlets do it, there are private companies, that's all they do. And most of it is publicly available. It's free. I mean, sometimes you need a subscription, but most of it is publicly available, and you bump into the public opinion polls in the press. So you read the New York Times or you read the Washington Post, it's in there all the time. All the time. 65% of Americans want this, or 62% of Americans don't want this, or whatever. It's in there all the time. It's in there daily. At the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. It's in there. Any serious top tier newspaper is going to feature the polling results. So there's a very long list of entities that do this kind of research, and they publish that research, and it's publicly available, most of it. And you can go to websites like one that I use is pollingreport.com. Pollingreport.com, they collect public opinion polls on a very long list of subjects, and you can go to the website, and there's a really long list of links, and anything that's in the news, like gun control or abortion or whatever, and you click on the subject that you want to research, and you can read public opinion polls until you're blue in the face. I mean, until you pass out from exhaustion. It's all there, and the pollingreport.com is a pretty extensive website, and the amount of information on there is huge. And what we learn when we look at the public opinion polls is something rather striking emerges, and that is the nation is not divided. You heard that right. The nation's not divided. I started doing pretty serious reading of the public opinion polls about 10 years ago. And maybe a little more than 10 years ago. And I'd heard that, there's a remarkable level of agreement, degree of agreement in the population. And I thought, wow, is that true? So I kind of buried myself in polling research and looking at the numbers, and lo and behold, it's true. About 2/3 of Americans are in agreement on just about every political issue that you can think of. Some of the issues, depending on what's in the news or what's not in the news, the numbers can fan out a bit more, but basically every major political issue, the population is in agreement to the tune of 2/3. Well, that doesn't spell nation divided to me. There's a pretty solid majoritarian level of agreement among the population. And Americans, they think they're alone, they're atomized. There's a sense of atomization. There's a sense of alienation, I think. And if they watch these opinion polls, they would realize, you're not alone. There's a lot of agreement out there, like Doge, and what Elon Musk is up to. Most Americans are not on board with this. Most Americans are not happy about this. Most Americans are not happy about a lot of things. And that's one of them. So they have to watch. The power has to watch. Now they can sort of spin things and put an ideological twist on things and scare people into thinking, if you support this, then you're going to be supporting that. And racism works like a champ. It works like a charm. And they hit that button a lot. But by and large, I mean, they have to be aware that most Americans are not. But being critical of the government and being critical of there's a lot of members of Congress who are encouraging that. The government wants you to be critical of the government. It wants you to have take a dim view of Washington and Capitol Hill. They want you to take a dim view of it. They want you to be angry at it. They want you to blow off steam in your living room or your kitchen. And and then when you go to work, you go to the mall or whatever, you just we go to the holiday dinner table, and you keep it buttoned. You don't talk about it. You just vent in your living room or your kitchen, and that's perfectly fine. People can be angry because, John Locke pointed out centuries ago, the people are more apt to suffer than stir. They'll stir. They'll grin and bear it, even though they're angry. John Locke knew this quite well. So that leads us to the spectrum itself. So you take the population, where the population stands most of the time. Like I said, it agrees 2/3 of the time on just about every political issue. Okay, knowing that, we calibrate the center, and I'll get the image up there. Calibrate the center according to where the population sits. Now that is your liberal center. Liberalism is a centrist political philosophy. It's got its roots in John Locke and Tom Paine, and one book I highly recommend is The Limits of State Action by Wilhelm von Humboldt. And in it, von Humboldt says, the proper limits of state agency must lead to a consideration of greater freedom for human energies and a richer diversity of circumstances. The highest ideal, therefore, of the coexistence of human beings seems to me to consist in a union in which each strives to develop himself from his own inmost nature. That's liberalism. Liberalism comes from the Latin word liber, meaning freedom. It's about fundamental, basic freedoms. And then John Locke sketched a minimal government that really got Thomas Jefferson's attention. And you throw in Wilhelm von Humboldt and Thomas Paine in the mix, and that's about where that's what we call classical liberalism. So that's your liberal center. Okay, that's the middle. Now, what's interesting is that if you go way out to the extremities, you got the far right wing, you got the far left wing, and it gets kind of cuckoo out there in the extremities. But if you start at the liberal center and you move to the right, and then you will find, as indicated in the image, the Democrats and the Republicans are both to the right of the population. Now, as you move to the right, you get more conservative. You move to the left, you get more liberal, get more progressive, so on and so forth. What does that mean? It means when I move to the right, I want a slower rate of change. When I move to the left, of center. I want a faster, more dramatic rate of change. I want more and faster, political change. But if I move to the right, things get conservative. And when it comes to conservatism, like classical conservatism, we think of Edmund Burke, who wrote a book right after the Revolution in France. It's called Reflections on the Revolution in France. And in it, he presents, what became known as political conservatism. It's a book that's well worth reading. I can't say I agree with him to the letter, but he does make some interesting points in that book, and it's rather worth reading. Read your Burke. You'll think you'll find some surprising things in there. It's not how the word's used now. How the word's used now is, the definition of conservative seems to be not liberal, and the definition of liberal seems to be not conservative. So it's hardly helpful. So we start at the liberal center, we move to the right. There's the Democrats, there's the Republicans. The Republicans are a little more to the right, becoming more to the right as time marches on, and then they're moving to the right all the while. And the Democrats are moving to the left. Now, this is important. The Democrats are in fact moving to the left, no doubt about it. But they're moving to the left toward the center. They're moving toward where you want, what the population wants. But if you take the New York Times, you take the university system, you take the intellectual culture, it's about at the left dotted line, the Democrats. That is the left edge of respectable liberal opinion. Anything to the left of the left line is left-wing cuckoo land. However, that's where the majority of the population sits. So when your uncles are bickering at the table or at the holiday or at the family get-together or whatever, they're in between those two lines. They're in between the Democrats and the Republicans, and they're using this sort of basically artificial vocabulary, and they've checked their actual preferences and their wants and their dislikes and their likes. They check those at the door, and they have confined themselves to those two dotted lines, which is remarkable, which is a remarkable achievement, that you can get a population to work within those two lines. So when you're hurling these terms like liberal and conservative at one another, you're within those two lines, and you have completely left what the population wants. Anything left of the left dotted line is treated with utter contempt. In the New York Times, they don't want nothing to do with it. Like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they're basically centrist liberals. Bernie Sanders is a centrist liberal. He's just an FDR Democrat and nothing more, nothing less. He doesn't have a socialist bone in his body. Neither does Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She doesn't have a socialist bone in her body. She might belong to a socialist organization, but that doesn't make her a socialist. Where the population stands is treated with contempt by liberal news outlets. Principally, my go-to example here is going to be the New York Times. It wants nothing to do with what the population wants. The New York Times is all about Hillary Clinton. It's all about Obama. That's the left out of line. People critical of Obama would refer to him as a socialist or something, which is a joke. He's a 70s Republican. They're all 70s Republicans. Hillary Clinton's a 70s Republican. Her husband is a 70s Republican. Kamala Harris is a 70s Republican. Biden was a 70s Republican. They're all cut from the same bolt. They're all what Republicans used to be back in the 70s, you know. And if, you know, and even go back even further, I mean, if you go to, you know, like Eisenhower, you know, Eisenhower wouldn't even recognize those people as being Republicans. And if Nixon came back from the dead, he would just look at all the politicians I just named, you know, Biden, Obama, Kamala Harris, you know, and he'd be like, yeah, they're Republicans. They're Republicans. That's all they are, you know. So that's really important to keep in mind, that yes, the Democrats are moving to the left, toward the center. Toward what you want, toward the population, which is an agreement to the tune of 2/3 and is not divided. Does that help? Send me your questions. Yeah, on social media when Obama first won the election, the gushing and the swooning on social media was a bit nauseating. And Facebook, primarily. They're like, our guy's in the White House. Your guy. Your guy? You mean Harvard's guy? You mean Wall Street's guy? Whoops. It's not your guy. These people do not have you in mind. Ever. Maybe Bernie Sanders does, but you know, the rest of these guys, the rest of them that I named, no. They think about Wall Street, and they think about the vertical power. They think about vertical power. They think about that's where their attention is, not you. Not people who work for a living, you know. But they liked Obama, right? They liked him. But I discourage people I talk to about politics from liking politicians. Why would you like a politician? Why would you? They're not there to like. Do you like the president of your bank? You don't even know who the president of your bank is. And they've got all your money. So why do you like a politician? Why do you like who's in the White House? You know, presidents or candidates. Why do you like those people? They're not there to like. They're there to do a job. And if they don't do the job, they should be, you know, excused from that job, and someone else should be given the job. They're not there to like. So that's just a little quick primer. And the whole time I've been talking about politics, you have no idea where I stand on politics. You have no idea, because I haven't told you. But maybe I'll do a podcast episode and I'll talk about my personal politics. That'd be fun. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Do an episode just on where I'm coming from politically. That'd be fun. Maybe a good future episode for the inquiry.